Hi, my name is Emma Houghton, and I made some research here on Mary Cynthia Dickerson, who lived from 1866 to 1923, who was a forgotten female herpetologist. And my mentor for this research was Dr. Tamara Calkins. So Mary Cynthia Dickerson was a museum curator for the American Museum of Natural History and a herpetologist who was also passionate about photography and education. Society in the United States during the late 1800s and early 1900s was taking steps towards equality for women, with women being allowed some of the jobs men traditionally held, such as teaching, although this was at a significant pay reduction and always under male supervision, and gaining the ability to vote in the United States in 1920. As Dickerson died in 1923, it's important to note that for the majority of her lifetime, she lived in a society that largely did not value the role of women in the workplace and did not even allow women to vote. Despite this, she achieved the roles of instructor, head of the Department of Zoology and Botany at Rhode Island Normal School, and museum curator. In spite of her barriers, Dickerson was also a successful researcher who wrote books such as the Frog Book, North American Toads and Frogs, with a study of the habits and life histories of those of the northeastern states, which is the true focus of this research. Her writings were very popular in part due to her addition of her own photographs and illustrations. Additionally, this work was a valuable contribution to herpetology in the United States. It included a tremendous amount of research that would traditionally have to be accumulated by multiple people. Despite this, Dickerson is almost entirely unknown to the public, with her research not being very easy to find at all, as well as literature discussing her life being almost non-existent. One of the only subjects more openly available to the public on her life was her role as a museum curator and founder of the Department of Herpetology in the museum. And a museum curator manages their department, such as collecting and identifying specimens, organizing educational presentations, and so on. And this is work she did for the course of about 12 years. And given how rare it was for women to be in positions of power, Dickerson made a significant accomplishment by acquiring this title. Unfortunately, his role was cut short after only a year, allegedly due to her deteriorating mental health. Regardless, it shouldn't be emphasized necessarily how long she spent in the role, but how she got there and what she achieved along the way. And a lot of this was achieved through her hard work in other departments as well as her own research. Her passion appeared to have been a guiding force as she exceeded the efforts of her peers and incorporated her own skills, such as photography, into her work. For example, she wrote a 104-page guide to the Forestry Hall when she was only employed as an assistant. In addition, the preface of her frog book states that she has a deep interest in her work being used for educational purposes. These interests, combined with her fascination of the subject, resulted in her spending what must have been hours of work and dedicating her unpaid time. Incorporation of her interests were perfectly demonstrated in the Frog Book, which, as with most of her work, collected high praise from the public and peers alike. The photography and illustrations in this book exhibit a wider range of toads, frogs, and their various life stages. She often includes many images of the same frog or toad at different angles to more clearly relay their appearance to the reader. In addition, it includes detailed descriptions of each organism, including a key for easy distinction of what a species is for the reader's use. Researchers in biology, such as myself, often will depend upon these texts for learning how to identify species while working in the field. The anatomy of each specimen is described in their appropriate scientific terminology, with the specific appearance and use of these parts of the body described in depth. For example, an excerpt of her book reads as follows: "Between the lateral folds are two rows of rounded olive green or brown spots, each circled by a narrow line of yellow or white. Below the folds along each side of the body, there are two irregular rows of similar spots. There is a dark spot above each eye, and there may be a dark spot in front of the eyes. This demonstrates the care and detail she took when she examined organisms. This included life history, which includes their reproduction, social behavior, habitat, prey and predator relationships, and many other factors, which is also described in this level of detail. It's very difficult today to find this level of detail in an individual text, let alone that done by a single person. The significance of this is still evident today with all of our current available technologies, as our own Dr. Beck, who is a herpetologist at our college, he made a book focused on the biology of Gila monsters and beaded lizards, and this book focused solely on 2 species of lizard, but the detailing of each aspect of their nature made him really well known in the herpetology community. And he's actually a mentor of mine, for which I'm doing research on lizards, where I spent over 150 hours attempting to collect only a total of 17 specimens in the end of a singular species. But Dickerson, who almost no one's heard of in the herpetology community, did this level of work for the various species of frogs and toads in the whole of the northeastern United States, which amounts to approximately 460 different species. And as a herpetologist, Dickerson's work was of tremendous significance to the field for this reason. I'm convinced that it was due to the status of women in science in the late 19th and early 20th century that her work was largely forgotten. In order to complete this work, a wide variety of tools would have been needed. This include things such as observation microscopes, magnifying glasses, preservatives, as well as brushes and researchers by other scientists, all to prepare the specimen, identify it, and make sure that they were identifying it correctly. They would also wear formal attire and keep things clean but not sterile, which is both different from the way we do things today in order to collect DNA samples and other elements of identification. And so the combination of these tools and her past experience were necessary for her to perform the research needed for her frog book. And this consisted of a bachelor's degree, this experience, as well as time as an instructor at the variety of institutions, work at the American Museum of Natural History, and her own research. And her time as an instructor would have taught her how to explain complicated subjects to others, which would have made explaining the intimate details of species of frogs and toads in her book an easier task. She also did research on a variety of other animals, such as fish, lizards, moths, and butterflies. And this was very unusual because most people focus on a singular species or class, just because it's such a breadth of information, but her aptitude in the identification process is pretty clear through the various animals she studied. And in spite of all of these efforts to make her research really well done, her gender seems to have impacted the perception of her achievement by others. It's been suggested that Dickerson may have had part in the writing of more than 140 articles, notes, editorials, and introductions to articles by other authors, listed sometimes as only the editor or by her initials, as well as contributing to many more anonymously. It is common knowledge that female authors throughout history have had to use their pseudonyms, their initials, or write anonymously in order to have their work be presumed to be written by a man and taken seriously by publishers, peers, and the public, which leads me to believe that Dickerson must have felt some sort of negative way by the male scientific community to the extent she felt it necessary to opt out of recognition for her own work. If this was in fact the case, it further puts into doubt the story that was presented by her male employers and peers at the museum that she grew mentally ill as a direct result of being overworked and taking on way too many responsibilities, which really echoes the idea that society had of women at the point of time, that they weren't capable of handling this type of work. And we do know that when she was ripped away from her work, it resulted in a severe negative decline in her mental state, and she did suffer from a mental health condition, but it is still unknown today exactly how extreme this condition was and how much of it was based on any sort of overworking versus just natural genetic factors. And despite the unfortunate decline of her mental health at the end of her career, she was an accomplished scientist and educator. With her ambition and passion, she was able to push past many of the barriers placed on her by society that were dealt to her solely based on her gender. She wrote remarkable pieces of scientific literature and made major contributions in the realm of herpetology. She discovered many new species and so extensively documented others that future research would have had to utilize her work in order to make new scientific discoveries on those species. As a result of all of this, Mary Cynthia Dickerson should be an inspiration to both female scientists and herpetologists alike, and she deserves a larger emphasis in our scientific history. I really think it's a shame that young scientists and herpetologists, like I was at one point, don't have access to the kinds of people such as Mary Cynthia Dickerson to learn about and to aspire to be like. And in conclusion, I have some images here that I use throughout the presentation, mostly that are from her own, as well as some references. And that ends my presentation. Thank you.